I'm you, given its immediate context, is such a great line and panel. Why? Firstly, it's snappy. 2 words, 2 syllables. There's a reason it's called a one-liner. It's because comebacks, badass lines, and displays of dialogue dominance are more impressive when you can get exponentially more meaning out of exponentially less text.
Fall.
Which, hilariously, is exactly why video essayists like me are seen as pretentious, because we have a bad habit of doing the exact opposite. Secondly, okay, it's ironic, because the panel reads, "I'm about to kill you." Comparing yourself, acting like you have so much in common with your enemy, reads as contradictory, but not in a way that seems wrong, like it's framed as nonsense, but it's framed as if he's right, that he knows what he's saying is on its face contradictory, and yet he means it anyway. Of course, if you just see this as standalone, that meaning is obscure to you, but because everything else is so cool, you're drawn in. You assume the unknown lines that link the dots you're seeing are just as cool as the dots themselves. And that's why I enjoyed the spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen more than the anime itself. So, okay, I think Jujutsu Kaisen is a lot like Demon Slayer, both decent stories with significantly overcompensating adaptations. Albeit, Demon Slayer is very generic but cleanly executed, while JK is more unpredictable but also very volatile in execution, which, yeah, personally I prefer. So, like, don't get me wrong, I like this anime, and God only knows Shibuya is, like, the best arc in the show. There's, like, a ton of great standalone moments, keyword standalone. But this is all to say that prior to Shibuya coming out, this video came up on my screen and I'm like, fuck it, I'll spoil myself, because, like, whatever, I'm not that invested. And so, stage 1 after watching that video was, god damn, I should not have spoiled myself, because to a point, like, the more context added, the better. For instance, you see this after watching season 1, like I did, and you know who these characters are, and you understand this is a long-awaited, satisfying revenge moment for a very hated character, and that makes it even better in your mind. But stage 2 was when I actually watched Shibuya afterward, and I was like, you know what? I'm kind of glad I spoiled myself, because the idea/feeling I had of those spoilers ended up being more compelling to me than the final product. It's kind of like that thing in horror where the monster is better off being obscured. While I'm reluctant to criticize the golden child of JK, I think this is like a unique enough perspective that it's worth sharing. So with that being said, let's get back to it. I'm you. What did I think Yuji meant by this? Well, prior to season 2, Mahito, referring to it as a fucking alcoholic drink, goddammit. I was trying so hard to fucking get the name right. It's not working for me. Okay. Well, prior to season 2, Mahito is set up as sort of like a human curse. He's sort of like a mirror, and he explicitly talks as if he's spawned specifically from humans' hatred and vitriol. So, like, that's it, obviously. During Shibuya, Mahito must tell Yuji that because you as a human spawned me, then that means all of the reasons you hate me for is part of you too. I'm you. It's a taunt, rubbing it in Yuji's face that he can't admit to a darkness within him that's inherent to him because he's human. Furthermore, Yuji makes such a big deal about not killing others, but has recently been forced to kill some. Mahito, on the other hand, revels in it, and so it makes sense for him to be taunting Yuji because he knows when he was forced to kill before that part of him understood what it was like to be Mahito. To see something you feel is disgusting and unnatural and feel relief when it's snuffed out. Deep down, part of Yuji enjoyed killing. Maybe Mahito points out to him that even the whole idea of exorcism to Yuji is just a cope that allows him to feel good about killing what is clearly a sentient creature. I mean, really, what's the difference between the death painting wounds that he was remorseful over and curses like Mahito and Hanami? Yuji didn't start killing here, he's been killing the whole time. And so this moment, I'm you, must be Yuji admitting to Mahito, you know what? You're right. And that's terrifying to Mahito, because he's just realized he is about to die screaming, and the epitome of the horror he's about to suffer is the fact that he created this outcome by goading Yuji. That's genius! What a great way to kill off a hated character. And then there was the how, right? Well, how is Yuji beating him? Not just beating, how is he dominating him like this? What was the logic to make this badass revenge moment possible? And you look at the visuals, right? Which, by the way, is the other cool thing about the scene. It's so different from Shibuya. And so it begs the question, how did we get here? And then it clicks with you, right? It's Yuji's domain expansion, something that's known for giving characters a dominating edge if fully executed, something that completely changes the visuals of the scene, and it's something Yuji doesn't have yet, and so he's anticipated to gain it in a climactic moment. Brilliant. What a fucking moment. Anyway, so you watch it, and Yuji literally seems to change Mahito's explanation of why he's him when he finally decides to concede it. Neither the first or the second explanations are particularly earth-shattering, or even anything for Yuji to be particularly ashamed about in order to initially reject it, and the snowy mountain walls aren't really there, it's just figurative. Okay. Like, you see what I mean? There's these hype moments, but it's all very weak in terms of the connective tissue that draws it together. And so if you've just seen the spoilers, you anticipate everything you can't see around the hype moments facilitating it, but it doesn't. I understand we're going for the "we're not so different, you and I" trope, but that's a perfect example of a trope that rides on its reasoning. Saying you're the same because you save people without a second thought, like I kill people without a second thought, is barely a comparison. Doing a different thing, but doing it without a second thought, that's your entire justification to say you're the same? The second, I assume, retcon idea, that Yuji kills curses without a second thought like Mahito kills humans without a second thought, is at least stronger as a comparison, but it's hardly worthy of a "we're not the same, you and I" trope, because like, Yuji killing curses has been shown to be a completely rational perspective, while Mahito's isn't. If they were going to make a big deal of Yuji mindlessly killing curses, then have him realize that curses and humans are both sentient and deserving of life, and then have him choose to go on mindlessly killing curses like Mahito anyway. That could have been really cool. But without it, this "I'm you" moment doesn't really have any edge to it, because like, edge is necessary for this trope. A "we're the same" trope hits hardest when the hero is forced to admit he has genuine qualities of a villain. I think maybe the idea is that he's been trying to find a greater purpose and meaning in this heroic goal, and in the end he couldn't find one, so he basically just does his job. But like, is that villain behavior? Something that makes him the same as Mahito? There's not really much shame in admitting he's a cog in the machine, one who mindlessly kills curses, when he, one, hasn't even really done that so far, and two, even if he was obviously right in doing so. He's just clocking in his 9 to 5 like everyone else, and there's not even a question if his job is unethical anyway. It's a net positive. He kills things that are legitimate threats to humans. He's never even been challenged by a harmless curse unless you count his allies' techniques and creations, but then he doesn't mindlessly kill them either. So this all means that Mahito is obviously not the same as him by choosing to kill those who obviously don't need to be killed. This, along with retconning what Mahito originally actually says, means none of this really connects that strongly or logically to any other part of the narrative. And it's the same thing with the wolves. It needs to be way more connected to prior establishments to make the moment feel baked in. Even if you desperately want for this to be just a metaphor, its connection to what's actually happening is, like, what? He's being hunted, so it's being visually represented by wolves hunting? A good metaphor needs to be more specific than that. Like, it's not like Game of Thrones where you have specific animal sigils for houses, or Haikyuu where you have animal monikers for sports teams, nor is it using the behavior of those animals to draw any clever connections, like the lone wolf dies but the pack survives, or like a battle at the garbage dump being used to represent a match between two animals that compete in the same sort of area. Like, Yuji's not even taking on a specific quality of a wolf. He's not even hunting him like a wolf. If anything, he's toying with him. Likewise, Mahito is only a bunny in the sense that he's helpless. That's it. Wasn't the whole scene supposed to be about how they're the same anyway? So why choose animals that were so different? Like nothing reinforces itself. And none of that even accounts for the fact that the best metaphors both happen in the world of the narrative and have meaning behind what's actually happening. Like, the stag killing the wolf in Game of Thrones at the start happens in-world, in front of the characters, and even has tangible effects like giving them the direwolf pups. But it's also foreshadowing that the stag house is soon to lead to the death of the leader of the wolf house. This is why this could have been great as like a domain expansion, allowing you to actually build the in-world narrative, but also have what's happening be metaphorical of their conflict, because you can choose whatever visuals you want for Yuji's domain. Basically, the more things within a scene or a story that are linked together make something feel thought out and put together. You assume that happens when you just see a disconnected hype moment, but you gotta watch it and it's just kind of not. Another example would be like character death, right? The characters chosen as lambs for the slaughter this arc are like, whoa, right? Like, Mechamaru was already fairly brutal, but then Nanami and then Nobara, you know, one of the main trio, that's crazy, right? But again, you kind of expect it to be more meaningful and interconnected than it actually is. Hilariously, I'd actually say Mechamaru was probably the one that was executed best. Executed. But the other two kind of feel like, they kind of feel like that one YouTube animation from like 10 years ago where the characters are pitching cliched story ideas.
Is this your girlfriend? This your mother? This your dog? Oh man, now I'm gonna fight you.
You know, it kind of feels like it's gratuitous, like the deaths were purely there to break Yuji and the audience and make them hate Mahito. Especially when there's two of them back to back. Like, in contrast, Mechamaru is the whole thing that kicks off Shibuya. It makes perfect sense why he's a spy, why he needs Mahito specifically, and why he's in this now dodgy situation that requires him to escape, and why Mahito and Geto need to kill him. Nothing feels conveniently set up by the writer. But Nobara and Nanami could have just happened at any point, anywhere, for any reason, with nothing really making it contingent on any other part of the narrative. Nanami literally stumbles across Mahito, and Yuji then stumbles across him at the perfect time to watch him die. Nobara is a little better. Yuji and Nobara Nomura both stumble upon Mahito for this to happen, but once they do, it at least becomes explicitly Mahito's goal to kill her in front of Yuji. But then, the death itself doesn't feel very earned. The whole switcheroo thing is like mildly clever on its surface, but then it's like, even if that wasn't the real Mahito, why would you just stand there anyway? Nomura gets done kind of dirty, honestly. Not in terms of like she loses, but she's written really inconsistently. Like last season, there was this whole thing about her not being able to match Yuji in athleticism and fighting hand to hand, and they played into that like so well with her being like a support fighter that ended up being more badass than who she was supporting, but it was done in a way that acknowledges her drawbacks. But then here, she's like duking it out 1v1 with a Mahito duplicate, who could still do this, by the way. It's like, you couldn't even handle the twink before, which itself seems like your intelligence was tanked for just so you could lose. He just underhand threw a sword at you? You're not gonna question why he did that in a world with fucking magic? And the sword had a fucking hand on it! Anyway, she goes from not handling the twink to fighting Mahito to suddenly her reaction time's tanking to nothing so she can get slapped in the face once. Like, I don't know. In contrast, right, stealing Gojo, the world building around him being the strongest, how that connects and it changes everything, and his fight with the curses to achieve that ceiling, that whole thing is so clever, so well thought out. A lot of people say like JK is very exposition-y, but the flip side of that is that if you're willing to get invested, to pause and think, to go back and rewatch when you don't understand, it creates these fights that you can really sink your teeth into. That's how you get fights like the Yuji and Nobara team up in season 1, but here it just doesn't feel like the planning is all there. That is, except for the beginning, so Mechamaru and Gojo, and the ending climax, Todo and Yuji versus Mahito. All of which is phenomenal and exactly what I felt I was going to get based on the spoilers. Oh my god, that final boogie woogie with Mahito's hand was so clever, so brilliantly built up to in a way that was both hilarious and, once I understood, had me out of my fucking seat with hype. That punch felt so fucking good. That is what earned means. I think it's probably my favorite scene in the entire show, honestly. Anyway, I'll come back to Nobara and Nanami's death in a bit, and what it needs to feel more like a culmination of plot points rather than kind of throwaway, but let me just go on from there. So another example of this whole thing would be Toji. I didn't know who he was at the time, but once I did, I knew he'd be rocking up in this arc, and conceptually, that's great. I love wildcard characters, a wrench that's thrown in between two warring factions with its own completely different agenda, but it ultimately felt quite lacking both in how we got there, how it links to scenes prior, and the effect it had on the plot after, how it links to the scenes in post. The logic to bring back Toji works, but it ultimately relies on making entirely new characters with entirely new techniques, so his way back into the story isn't particularly clever or interesting. And then with him back, what's done with that? Well, he takes out a minor villain that effectively didn't exist prior and had zero investment, and then he has a fight with Megumi and kills himself when he finds out. And that last part, as logic for him leaving the story again, is pretty good. That feels like baked into the narrative. But at the end, you're sort of wondering what the point was. If you remove Dagon and Toji from the story, basically nothing changes. Just have Jogo injure and punt Megumi out the window and to set him up for the twink, and have Jogo come in to burn everyone else and fuck off when he senses Sukino. I feel like Gato's fucking adopted daughters ended up being better wildcards than Toji, because at least they provided a good specific line of logic to save everyone from Jogo, and then have him home in on Yuji as opposed to just having the writer's intended character stumble across where he needed to be by complete coincidence. Like I said, I like that what stops Toji's rampage is him realizing who Megumi is, but I was expecting the rampage itself to matter. And I don't even mean like lasting negative consequences, as is the case with a lot of this arc. It could be positive. It's kind of baffling that not only does Megumi not somehow realize who this is and therefore can't really be affected by it, but also we didn't even have Maki pull herself up and come to Megumi's rescue under the logic that no matter how bad Jogo burnt her, she has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to fight someone this strong with no cursed energy so she can learn how to get stronger herself. Why not give her a secondary objective in this fight where she's trying to find out exactly how Toji got his packs so she can gain it herself? That'd be cool. Okay, the wiki is telling me that that's not how Heavenly Pacts work, but I'm pretty sure this was literally a retcon, because there was an early distinction made between Heavenly Curses being at birth and Heavenly Pacts you choose yourself. Anyway, my point is you brought a popular character back for him to have no influence on the characters he was relevant to. Isn't that kind of a waste? When I got spoiled on this, I just kind of assumed this was a given, and that hyped me, but the best you get is like some reactions from the Zenin clan, and that's it. Like, I like the moments that are here. Toji's cool, he does cool things, but a lot of it feels very superficial. Like we took Toji out as if he's some fucking keys we can jangle, and then we immediately put him back in the box. Now, Sukuna is probably a better example of a wildcard. It's a unique twist that Sukuna actually takes out more bad guys than good, and he has like 2, maybe 3 lasting impacts. He takes out Jogo, traumatizes Yuji, and decimates Shibuya, ultimately making the character's goal a failure, so at least it feels like he's done something. But it still kind of feels like it's missing potential. There's lasting impact, sure, but what's the point of lasting impact if not to change what was otherwise the course of the plot? Rather than complicating the plot, releasing Sukuna actually ends up simplifying it because, like Toji, he's a problem that just solves itself. In fact, Sukuna solves more than just himself, he takes out a villain too. Look, Sukuna disappearing and leaving Yuji with the carnage is like, I like that, but then he's just completely gone, so it kind of feels like the only impact all this had on future events was one extra force pushing down on Yuji's mental state, which is kind of arbitrary. Sukuna, Jogo, and his choice to feed Yuji 10 fingers plays no role in Shibuya after it, and it all just seems like, okay, we have the Toji fights, put him back in the box. Get out Sukuna. Okay, we have the Sukuna fights, put him back in the box. Get out Mahito. Like, rather than have this interweaving narrative, what we have, it feels more like a tournament arc where everything's broken into little sections and there's no interactions between any of them. It's not without its exceptions, obviously. Maharaga is probably a small example of that, albeit really all that build up and the twink stabs you in the back once and now you summon it. It's a bit convenient. Again, good fucking moment. Great character to do the summoning on, but the logic's a little weak. But like, apart from that, Sukuna goes back in the box. You'd think consuming 10 fingers at once would have a more tangible effect than a 30-minute free trial, but the writer seemingly just wants his 30 minutes of Sukuna doing a bunch of crazy shit, and after that he becomes inconvenient to the narrative again, and rather than play that out and bend it into something more intricate, Gege just wants him to fuck off. So he goes out of his way to say that despite the 10 fingers, Sukuna's revival is only temporary, and then he has to justify why Jogo did this in the first place if it's only temporary, so then he goes out of his way again to retcon Sukuna refusing to make a pact for healing Junpei, to be that he wasn't even able to make a pact in this situation, which doesn't even make sense because he showed he could reject human transfiguration when Mahito touched him, but we're led to believe that only now forming a pact with Yuji for a longer control of his body is possible in a similar Junpei hostage situation, but with one of his other friends instead. Wouldn't it be better if the takeaway from all this fingering be that Sukuna can't be controlled anymore, or at least that it's now possible for him to wrestle control depending on the situation? What if he voluntarily disappears to torture Yuji with Shibuya, but then he could reappear at any moment, and now Yuji is about to discover that he can't get close to anyone anymore? What if rather than have Yuji coincidentally stumble across Nanami a second too late, what if Yuji arrives on time to grab Nanami away from Mahito, only to look down and realize his own arm is in Nanami's chest because Sukuna took over for a second to stab him? And you get a repeat of Mahito and Sukuna laughing at Yuji just to really rub in that nothing has changed since Junpei. You are a failure. And not just that, it works perfectly with the idea that Yuji called himself a murderer. That's no longer hyperbolic. He couldn't help it the first time, but choosing to keep living now is a genuine risk to everyone around him. But now, trapped in this situation, Yuji has to desperately defend a mortally wounded Nanami from Mahito while trying to fortify his mind from Sukuna. All this until Mahito finishes Nanami off so he can have his original final line as well as enrage Yuji at Mahito. And then, as he's losing all hope and confidence, have Nobara come to the rescue, only for the thing that allows Mahito to kill her is a split second of hesitation from Yuji, thinking that Sukuna will come back if he tries to save her. He hopes, just for a split second, that Nobara will be fine without him getting close, and she's not. So now you have an incredibly clear but also specific unique line of events that join Shibuya together, which I feel like could only elevate the elation of Todo saving Yuji because now there's this additional, very specific factor that Todo can save Yuji from. His boisterous, cocky personality and brotherly bond is perfect for saying, trust me, if Sukuna trades places with you, we'll handle it together. And that's what allows Yuji to keep his head and Sukuna more or less at bay. And if you want to get real crazy, what if after Todo goes down, what allows Yuji to wrestle back complete control again from Sukuna is from truly accepting the dark impulses of human nature. By accepting himself and what he wants to do, he gains the sense of self that is said to make strong sorcerers. He can't go back and save the people Sukuna killed in his body, but if he dies now, he'll die knowing they died for nothing. And so the only way to make his life worth it is to murder cursors faster than cursors can murder humans. And if the requirement to do that is to embrace it, then so be it. Yuji is a good person who is not good at saving lives. He is only good at taking them. And so he shuts out Sukuna, opens his domain, and tells Mahito, I'm you. I think every critique I do is just starting to end up as a rewrite at this point.